The Toy Box Killer, the woman who escaped the Devil's Trailer. In March 1999, a 22-year-old woman named Cynthia Vigil Jaramillo ran naked down a dirt road near Elephant Butte State Park in New Mexico. She had a heavy metal slave collar locked around her neck and iron chains still clamped to her wrists. Terrified and bleeding from recent struggles, she flagged down a passing motorist for help. Cynthia told sheriff's deputies she had just escaped from a private torture chamber run by a local man, and the police sprang into action. Cynthia explained that 3 days earlier, she had been abducted in an Albuquerque parking lot by 59-year-old David Parker Ray and his girlfriend, Cindy Hendy. They had approached her under the pretense of a flat tire and invited her into their van to help. Hours later, Cynthia awoke, dazed and drugged inside a windowless trailer on Ray's property at Elephant Butte. She found herself stripped naked and chained into a padded exam chair. From then until her escape, she had been held captive. Ray repeatedly chained her in different positions and subjected her to hours of abuse. She later recalled seeing saws, electric drills, scalpels, and clamps arranged nearby. On the third day of captivity, Ray left the trailer to work at the nearby state park, leaving Cynthia alone with Hendy. Cynthia managed to pry free of the chair and snatch Hendy's keys from a table. Hendy lunged at Cynthia, but Cynthia fought back. In the struggle, she grabbed an ice pick from a shelf and hit Hendy with it, knocking Hendy unconscious, or at least stunned. Cynthia then bolted from the trailer, still wearing only her locked collar and chains. She ran barefoot down the dusty road until she reached a nearby home and begged for help. When police arrived at Ray's compound, they found Ray and Hendy near the trailer. Ray, a mechanic and park employee, was quickly taken into custody. Inside what he called his toy box, officers discovered something straight out of a nightmare. The walls of the trailer were fully soundproofed. No screams could escape into the night. In the center of the trailer sat a heavy-duty gynecological exam chair, bolted to the floor, with leather straps and clamps on every side. A large mirror was mounted on the ceiling so that any victim strapped into the chair would be forced to watch everything. Along the walls and tables were neat rows of torture equipment: handcuffs, chains, and wrist shackles of every kind, leg irons and spreader bars, whips, leather straps, and padded cuffs. Surgical instruments lay out in trays: scalpels, drills, clamps, some even rusted and bloodstained. Electric tools, such as drills and saws, appeared modified for use on people. Surgeons' forceps and puncture needles sat next to household tools like pliers and hammers. Photographs of women and pornographic magazines were tacked on the walls. In one corner, investigators found a camcorder on a tripod and stacks of videotapes labeled with dates. Everything in the trailer had a purpose in Ray's twisted design. Ray had planned this playroom for years. Detectives later found blueprints of the trailer's interior layout and receipts for soundproofing foam and medical equipment. He had padded the walls with insulation and even installed air vents so victims wouldn't suffocate. On a countertop lay dozens of audio tapes and notes. Ray had recorded lengthy spoken introductions and threats. In many tapes, he calmly said things like, "My name is David. You're here against your will," and then described how the captive would be kept, chained, and tortured, promising repeated sexual assaults and even death if she did not cooperate. These pre-recorded messages were intended to be played for a victim as soon as she regained consciousness after being drugged to shatter her will. To ensure obedience, Ray routinely gave his captives heavy sedatives. Authorities found bottles of barbiturates and anesthetics at the scene. Drugs such as sodium pentothal and phenobarbital. The victim's partial amnesia confirmed this. Many did not remember the first hours after being abducted, only regaining hazy consciousness in the chair later. Ray would then chain the woman in a spread eagle position, gag her, and begin his assaults. Often, after several days or weeks of repeated abuse, he would administer a final large dose of sedative and drive the victim to a remote road. There, still drugged, he would strip her of the chains and abandon her, counting on the drugs and trauma to make her too confused to remember who tortured her. Kelly Garrett, one survivor, recalled waking up the next morning on a highway, incoherent, with no idea how she got there. Ray did not act entirely alone. His girlfriend, Cindy Hendy, was present in many cases, and his 20-year-old daughter, Glenda Jessie Ray, also took part. Survivors later recounted how Jessie sometimes lured victims with social invitations. For example, in 1996, Jessie struck up a friendship with 24-year-old Kelly Garrett in a Truth or Consequences bar and offered to drive her home. Instead, she was taken to Ray's trailer. Another victim, Angelica Montano, said Cindy Hendy invited her to Ray's home under the pretext of picking up cake mix. When Montano arrived, she was seized and brought into the trailer. On both of them, the pattern was the same. A woman drugged into submission, chained in the chair, and raped and tortured for days. Angelica Montano survived 2 days in Ray's toy box. After enduring one horrific session, she sensed some pity from Hendy and pleaded for her release. Ray relented and drove Montano to the highway, leaving her on the roadside. Montano was later picked up by an off-duty officer at a bar. Confused and incoherent, he didn't believe her story and dropped her off at a bus stop. It wasn't until the newspaper printed Ray's name after Cynthia's escape that Montano realized the truth. She then went to police to report what had happened. Kelly Garrett's ordeal also ended in escape, but only by chance. After 2 days in captivity, Ray drove her home without fully sobering her up, telling her husband he had found Kelly semi-conscious on a beach. Kelly barely remembered those days and never reported anything. She moved away, thinking she was having a fugue or dream. In 1999, after Cynthia's story broke, police reviewed their evidence. They found a faint tattoo on one videotape recovered from the trailer that matched Kelly's ankle. Detectives tracked down Garrett in Colorado, where she had recovered physically, but still had no clear memory of what happened. Confronted with the records, Kelly realized the pieces of her broken memory were real. She provided testimony that would help convict Ray. By the spring of 1999, enough threads had come together to reveal the larger pattern. Investigators identified at least 14 women who had been abducted and tortured in the trailer, and all credited Cynthia's escape as the catalyst for uncovering the truth. Ray's own writings confirmed the scale. Officers found notebooks and calendars in which he logged the names of dozens of women, color-coding entries, and annotating projects with dates. In those journals, he bragged about targeting women he thought would not be missed, and noted every drug dosage he used. Forensics would later note that Ray claimed in his writings to have up to 60 victims, and that he saw himself as conducting experiments. In one unsettling entry, he outlined a method of making a body sink in water, a fantasy perhaps, of disposing victims in Elephant Butte Lake. Investigators took every claim seriously, but without remains, nothing could be proven. One confirmed killing did emerge. A friend of Ray's, Dennis Yancey, admitted his role in a 1997 murder. Police had connected Yancey to the disappearance of 22-year-old Marie Parker, who had been lured to Ray's trailer. Yancey confessed that Ray and Jessie had brought Parker there, and that Ray ordered him to strangle the woman to death. Parker's body was never found, but Yancey's confession led to his conviction. Ray himself, however, faced no murder charges. He remained formally charged only with the rapes, kidnappings, and torture of the women who survived. Ray's capture led to multiple trials. Prosecutors initially tried Ray separately for each survivor: Cynthia Vigil, Angelica Montano, and Kelly Garrett. The defense strategy was to claim consensual role play, arguing these women had willingly participated in extreme sexual games. The evidence, however, was overwhelming. The survivors' testimonies were largely consistent. Each said she was drugged, bound, and forced into the chair without her consent. Photos from inside the trailer, bloody restraints, bruises on the women's bodies, and the array of torture devices made a stark impression. An audio tape seized in the raid featured Ray speaking exactly as the victims described. In that tape, he casually told them, "I'm going to get my money's worth with you," confirming that these were not consensual encounters. In one trial, Ray's attorneys managed to block some of the audio evidence as too prejudicial. But even without every recording, the jury saw the totals. One juror would later say they found the victims credible once the physical proof was seen. By mid-2001, prosecutors were prepared to ask for the death penalty, since the charges carried multiple counts of kidnapping and rape. Instead of risking a lengthy trial, Ray agreed to a plea bargain. In July 2001, he pleaded guilty to federal and state kidnapping and torture charges related to the three women. The deal dismissed the death penalty charges in exchange for a combined sentence of 224 years. Under the agreement, charges against Jessie Ray, his daughter, were dropped, and Cynthia Vigil would not have to testify again. The surviving victims approved of the outcome, noting it kept Ray behind bars for life. Cindy Hendy, who had agreed to testify, pleaded guilty to conspiracy and obstruction and received 36 years in prison. She was paroled in 2019. Jessie Ray got a short sentence after pleading no contest to helping administer drugs. Not long after sentencing, David Parker Ray died in custody. On May 28, 2002, just as he was being transported to begin serving his state time, Ray suffered an apparent heart attack and collapsed in his cell. He was 62 years old. Officials noted that Ray had been in declining health. He had had heart problems, but his death was still a shock. With his passing, Ray avoided any additional interrogation that authorities had planned, particularly about possible burial sites of other victims. No bodies were ever conclusively linked to him. The state medical examiner ruled his death natural, and he was quietly buried. After Ray's death, law enforcement remained determined to account for all his crimes. The FBI in Albuquerque kept the investigation open, showing an unusual commitment given the time passed. Over the years, they sifted through inventories of evidence. In fact, in 2011, the FBI released photos of hundreds of items recovered from Ray's trailer and home. Photographs of rings, necklaces, earrings, glasses, articles of clothing, and the like, asking the public if any families of missing women could identify them. By one count, investigators noted they had cataloged more than 400 pieces of jewelry and garment fragments in the case. These were treated as potential trophies taken from victims. The FBI offered a reward and asked families of missing persons to review the evidence. To date, none of these items has been matched to a confirmed victim, but the appeal remains open. Throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, New Mexico media occasionally ran updates on the Ray case. Every year or two, they would mention a new lead or appeal. One special series even documented how Cynthia and another survivor, Christine Barber, went on to found a nonprofit called Street Safe New Mexico. Cynthia, now Cynthia Jaramillo, speaks publicly about her ordeal, encouraging other survivors to come forward. Together with Barber, she teaches street workers and vulnerable young women how to recognize dangerous situations, turning her horror into advocacy. Ray's surviving victims have often said that coming forward was difficult, but telling their stories prevented him from hurting anyone else. In the years since, David Parker Ray has been called many things in the press: a brutal sadist, the toy box killer, a monster of the desert. But the factual record is sober and precise. Ray was convicted of kidnapping, rape, and torture of 3 women in 2001 and sentenced to 224 years. He died in prison in 2002 at age 62, never having stood trial for any murders. The physical evidence, the torture instruments, and tapes in that trailer remains on record. Investigators continue to emphasize that Ray was meticulous. He kept lists, plans, videos, and diaries detailing his crimes. His own words, captured on tape, confirm the pattern investigators believe he followed. Today, law enforcement files on Ray's case note that while he claimed to have abducted up to 40 women, they could only prove a handful. That he died before admitting to any killings means many mysteries may never be solved. What is certain is the sequence of events. 1996 brought the first known victim. 1997, a known murder ordered by Ray. And 1999, Cynthia's escape that led to discovery of the trailer and subsequent trials. The trailer itself has been dismantled and sold for scrap, but its contents, in photographs and testimony, endure as cold facts. The final lesson of the case lies with the survivors who broke their silence. It was Cynthia's courage in running for help that finally revealed Ray's crimes, and it was the persistence of Angelica, Kelly, and others in telling their stories that allowed justice to be served. Their experiences are the basis of what happened, not any rumors or sensational legends. In the end, the story of David Parker Ray is a story of meticulous cruelty uncovered by determined investigation. The toy box was only the tool he used, a tool of bondage and control he assembled piece by piece. The real narrative is the documented evidence, black and white records of abuse, videotapes of victims, and police reports. As late as 2011, the FBI was still seeking information based on Ray's evidence. Though he never faced murder charges, Ray's name remains on the desks of missing persons detectives. The case is often cited in training as an example of how thorough police work and survivor testimony can piece together even the most harrowing crimes. In the quiet aftermath, what endures are the unvarnished facts. David Parker. Ray abducted, tortured, and raped women in a desert trailer in the late 1990s. Thanks to the bravery of the victims and the dogged work of investigators, those facts saw the light of day and put an end to his reign of terror.